Washington Journal continues.
Abdeslam Maghraoui is with the U.S. Institute of Peace, director of the Muslim World Initiative. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How is the U.S. doing within the Muslim world?
Well, the challenges are huge, and there is a lot to be done. Since the 9/11 terror attacks, the United States finds itself confronting an enemy that is ill-defined and hard to find, an enemy that can adapt, and an enemy on which there is a very little intelligence. And during the past 5 years or so, there have been an array of policies to confront this enemy. The war on terror, promotion of democracy and public diplomacy. But these policies have shown some weaknesses that we should think about.
I want to share with our audience one of the points from the American Foreign Policy and Islamic Renewal, that's the source of this information, which is offering this. Nearly 5 years after 9/11, the United States still lacks integrated and sustainable strategy to confront religious extremism in the Muslim world. Missing from U.S. policies is the recognition that the challenge comes not only from the conflict with Western modernity, but also with ideological conflicts inside the Muslim world. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, well, there has been a simmering conflict, ideological conflicts within the Muslim world that transpired in the 1979 revolution in Iran. Suddenly, the Shiism appeared as much more dynamic, more energetic, and providing alternative to the Sunni traditional sects of Islam. And the Sunni communities in the Arab world reacted by promoting their own forms of Puritan Islam that to counter the ideological influence of Shiism. And what we see today is precisely the result of this confrontation in the Muslim world.
So your recommendations from the U.S. Institute of Peace are as follows. First, create a Muslim World Foundation, engage Islamist parties on substantive issues, and support charities that help women and children.
Yes, I think it is very important to distinguish between radical and moderate Islamists in the Muslim world. If there is going to be serious reforms, serious change in the Muslim world, the United States will have to engage with the moderate Islamists. And they have representation, they have legitimacy, they muster support, and it will be hard to imagine significant change and reforms in the Muslim world without the support of the moderate Islamists.
Are there countries that can serve as a model between U.S. and the Islamic world that we should build on?
Yes, I think there are a number of countries. I mean, Turkey is one, Morocco to a certain extent, Indonesia. So there are examples, there are references that we can build on to promote that moderate form of Islam in the Muslim world.
Our phone number is 202-737-0001 if you support President Bush, and 202-737-0002 if you support the Democrats. We'll get to your calls in just a moment. I want to share with you a story that was published this morning in the London Telegraph, and it's an interview that the newspaper did with former President Jimmy Carter and his, quote, explosive critique of Tony Blair. He said, this is former President Carter, "I've been surprised and extremely disappointed by Tony Blair's behavior. I think that more than any other person in the world, the Prime Minister could have a moderating influence on Washington, and he has not. I really thought that Tony Blair, who I know personally to some degree, would be a constraint on President Bush's policies towards Iraq." And then he went on to say that he's embarrassed about how we're viewed in many parts of the world, saying that in countries like Egypt and Jordan, our approval ratings are less than 5%.
Yes, I mean, the U.S. standing in the Muslim world is still a serious problem, and I think that the recent Lebanon war has really deteriorated that view. I think the United States will have to reach out to Muslim communities and constituencies on substantive issues of supporting charities and steering away from talking about Islam as the enemy. And the perception, unfortunately, in the Muslim world, whether right or wrong, is that Islam is the enemy of the United States or was presented as such. And I think in Britain, Tony Blair has pretty much followed the same steps, and therefore we see this kind of problems.
Our guest is Abdeslam Maghraoui. He is with the U.S. Institute of Peace. We'll get to your phone calls. Great Falls, Virginia. Good morning, Democrats Line.
Good morning.
Caller, could you turn the volume down on your television?
I believe there is a major a problem with the West and East, and that's about Islam. Normally, unfortunately, they don't look at it very deep. Islam has problem with itself, and they don't believe to any competition and challenge. They say there is one-way street and one person, and that was God said this, and anything else or anybody else against that is wrong. And until they cannot, do not solve that problem with themselves and come to some kind of action, not just nice talking and talking. Because when you go to Muslim countries, you see between what they say and what they do in action in life is totally different story. And they just keep blaming some other countries, some other ideologies. And because I'm from that place, I know how they feel, how they think. And unfortunately, they have problem with themselves, and sooner or later, United States or West has to end up with this Muslim country in one wall, which is is dead end, and they have to make it clear what is Islam talking about and what they want to do in action for life. Just talking nice and being brother, but they have nothing to produce or product or just have nothing to make. And they said we want atomic, but they have nothing in their country to build. Even the simplest is they have to buy it and import it from other countries.
Thank you, caller. Your view?
Yes, clearly there is a major crisis in the Muslim world, and I think that many Muslim thinkers, religious figures, and scholars, and even communities are recognizing the need to reform Muslim societies, to reform Muslim polities. But I will refrain from associating that crisis with Islam itself. There are political problems that prevented the Muslim societies from evolving, and the special reports that I wrote precisely calls for this kind of self-assessment, self-critical view, allowing civil society, allowing independent religious scholars, allowing civic associations to rethink the heritage of Islam and to rescue it from the extremist views. And this is going to be a long-term work, and it's going to require a lot of effort and support. And I think the United States can play a major role in promoting that moderate Islam.
Our guest is a director of the Muslim World Initiative at the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is a federally government-funded think tank based here in Washington, D.C. He's a graduate of Princeton University. He's been at the Institute for the last 2 years. What's your background prior to that?
I was at Princeton University directing a program on the promotion of democracy in the Middle East and North Africa. And I'm originally from Morocco and did more of my studies here in the United States.
And you can get more information by logging on to their website. This is what it looks like, usip.org. Next call, Longview, Texas. Good morning. Longview, you with us? We'll try Minneapolis. Good morning to you, Democrats Line.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Just two notes about comments about your distinguished gentleman or guest. We can make the suggestions to improve the relationship between United States and the Islamic world are extremely valuable and they are credible. However, they are in works right now, and they are not going to work. And that's the reason why is the following: we can make everything that we are doing for relationship with the rest of the world, Islamic world, but as long as the core issue of Palestinian and Israeli, the land issue, is not going to be addressed, nothing would work. We have those NGOs working in the Islamic world, Islamic countries. We have liberals, forces wants to get rid of these extremists in the Islamic world, Muslim world, but within the Muslim world, the liberals, the extremists, they're all they all agree on one thing and one thing only, that is the root cause of this. And I just want to quickly, I'm just going to quickly add one of my, I'll comment on your previous guest, Dr. Rubin. There was an op-ed article on New York Times, I'm not sure, I would say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, by an Iranian dissident who said, who was sent to jail by the Iranian government, and he came out and he wrote an article in New York Times. And he, basically the premise was, do not support us from the way that your guest was describing.
Thank you. Let me take the caller's point and just ask you, because he talked about moderate Islamic nations, extremist nations. By your definition, which ones would be viewed moderate, which one's extreme?
Well, I'm not sure if we can really talk about nations. I'm talking more about like trends within the Muslim world. So we can find within moderate nations extremist elements as well. What I would call the moderates are political parties that are willing to participate in the political process, that do not resort to violence as form of political change, that encourage religious tolerance, that are willing to work within the political systems and allow diversity of views within their societies. Extremists are obviously those who think that they have the final truth on the religion, that is the word of God. They do not accept diversity. They are on a war not only against the West, but also against their own Muslims, brothers and sisters that do not agree with them.
Such as?
People who might say that we need that women need more equal rights, that diversity is something that is within Islam historically, that we should be open to the West. So there are trends, and I think that the Salafist movement symbolizes that kind of thinking.
For Abdeslam Maghraoui, our next call is from Boston. Good morning. Good morning, caller.
Hi, I actually have a couple of comments.
Go ahead, please.
I'm an Iranian American. I did medical research. I was pre-med finance. I did medical research in Iran last summer, where I met a lot of Iraqi people who were, coming for surgery because of the war. And I was hoping to give the reasons why they told me they believed America was behind most of the terrorist bombings going on in their country. The first reason was the fact that every Iraqi policeman and every Iraqi militiaman, not only the leaders, but every single individual is a Sunni. The second fact is the only justification U.S. has right now to be in Iran is with continued violence. If there's no violence, they would leave. And the third reason has to do with the main way people were dying at the time, which was these remote-controlled roadside bombs. Now, the U.S. administration also admitted that, Iraqis don't have the capability of making this bomb, and they put the blame on Iran. But the fact of the matter is, the Iranian government right now has no reason to exert its influence in Iraq. People need to realize the Iraqi Shiites and the Iranian Shiites, their history dates back all the way to the death of Muhammad, 600 A.D. They fought in wars together, they shed blood together. There's no reason for them to exert influence in Iraq right now to try to gain the loyalty of Iraqis. They're waiting for U.S. Soldiers to leave Iraq.
Thank you. Let me just follow up on that, because Linda Robinson writes about it this morning, Mr. Maghraoui, in U.S. News & World Report. She writes that with the number of violent deaths in Baghdad hovering around 2,000 a month, the U.S. and Iraqi security forces have launched a new effort to pacify the capital. But as with everything else in Iraq, there are no guarantees that it will be any more successful than previous attempts, which even senior U.S. commanders here concede was woefully ineffective.
Yes, the challenges in Iraq, I think, really show a bit the limits of the thrust of the current policy of fighting terrorism. The rising uncertainty in Afghanistan are also another measure. I think there is a need to rethink this the effort to counter terrorism precisely by engaging wide Muslim constituencies rather than regime change. I think that is a major sort of the problem. Iraq is a difficult situation, and I mean, there is no easy solution to it.
If you could change U.S. foreign policy to the Islamic world, what would you change?
I think there are some pivotal conflicts that need to be settled. I mean, the Israeli-Palestinian, Israeli-Arab conflict is one festering point that will have to be settled sooner or later. It is not, I will not agree that it is the root cause of all of the problems in the Muslim world. That's an exaggeration. I think it is one major problem that needs to be addressed. A second one is, I think, to engage the Muslim world on substantive issues. I mean, free elections are good in principle, they are desirable and should be encouraged. I don't think that they are the only way that you can reform the Muslim world. One should allow for diverse actors to participate in traditional networks that can be as effective in creating moderate communities. In fact, in Iraq, perhaps one of the problems is really not to include as many tribal chiefs or traditional structures as needed.
In a report that is available online by the U.S. Institute of Peace, the American Foreign Policy and Islamic Renewal, 2 points: the U.S. still lacks what our guest calls an integrated and sustainable strategy to confront religious extremism in the Muslim world, and democracy promotion efforts are likely to empower fundamentalists in many Muslim states. Lenore, North Carolina, is our next caller. Good morning.
Hey, I would just like to make a comment and ask the guest a question. We know what extremist Islamists are, but what about the common, average, everyday Muslim? Do they believe that it is all right to deceive the enemy? And is the United States the enemy? And do they consider deception a lie?
Well, I don't know what you mean by deceive the enemy. Could you please elaborate on that?
He's no longer on the line, but he also asked about our policy being a lie.
Well, I think that in the Muslim world, definitely the perception is that the U.S. policies really are contradictory. On the one hand, the U.S. wants to promote democracy and freedom. On the other hand, there is a war going on. There are civilian losses. And this is very common. You take any newspaper, you talk to any person from the Muslim world with a religious figure or scholar, moderate or radical, and they all agree on these points, and that's a problem that the United States will have to address.
Oscada, Michigan is next, supporter of the president. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, sir. You touched on women's rights earlier. I wanted to ask you, do you ever foresee a time when women have the exact same equal rights as men throughout the Muslim world? And aren't you a bit surprised that more free-thinking women in the West have not stepped forward and taken on this? This, to me, is at the source of all the problems in the Middle East.
Thank you, caller.
Yes, I think that is a major problem, the status of women in the Muslim world, and I think that in some countries they are realizing that in Morocco, Tunisia, Indonesia, Turkey, and there are passing laws to make women more equal to men legally. But there is a sociological reality also. While laws change, there is a lot of resistance from people in various areas. And in my sense, it will take some time before all of the women in the Muslim world will benefit from these changes. Those who are educated, who are urban-based, are going to know about these laws. They will use them when they go to court. In the countryside, in illiterate, poor urban areas, women are not going to benefit from this. But this is a major problem. I should add that the status of women, the equality of women in the Muslim world would never be the same as in the West. Just like the emphasis on individual freedom or democracy, there are going to be different forms of equality, of democratic representations, and we should not really expect some kind of full-fledged equality that even in the West doesn't in fact exist fully now.
Our guest is Abdeslam Maghraoui. He's with the U.S. Institute of Peace, and our next call is Ackworth, Georgia. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to make a brief comment. People here in the West are so eager to judge the Muslim world. When the U.S., and not particularly the U.S., but the West in particular, for centuries have been encroaching on the Muslim world, and even the least bit moderate people over time begin to be angered and they become narrow-minded to where their only main objective is to fight this enemy that's encroaching on their culture. And whether we want to agree or disagree and talk about women's rights and these little things that we just accomplished less than 200 or 150 years ago here in America, while we still have racism against our black brothers and sisters, and then we are so easy to judge the Muslims on a whole range of things when we are, attacking their lands and taking their resources, and then we want them to be democratic. And our double standard where Israel has 250 nuclear weapons or more, and now we want to tell Iran that you can't even enrich uranium. I mean, it goes on a whole range of things, our double standard, and we don't want to look ourselves in the mirror. And eventually, in the end, we're going to be the losers because we are not playing an even and equal, a fair, role in the world.
Thank you.
I think that the speaker really summarizes a lot of what I hear and I read in the Muslim world. I mean, she says that's more eloquently than I could.
Long Beach, California, Democrats line, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I'm just a little bit astounded that through all the conversations, both with this guest and the previous guest, that nobody has mentioned the root of the real problem, which is oil. Unfortunately, our administration is oil people, which has brought it out from sort of behind the curtain to the forefront. And every regime that we support over there has nothing to do with democracy or religion, but simply favorable oil deals with the United States, for example, Saudi Arabia. And I think that religion is the straw man that this administration is putting out because their base in the Republican Party would understand a quote, good fight between religions when they do not understand the deep rift that we're causing at any price just for oil.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. We'll hear from one more caller from Bakersfield, California, on the line supporting President Bush, and then get your reaction. Good morning.
Good morning. I think you would have a much easier time convincing the American public and the rest of the world that all Muslims are not fanatics if after 9/11 you did not see dancing and partying in the streets, firing of guns into the air, condemnation of Israel, and yet not a word is said about the Hezbollah and so forth, which are basically from Iranian troops, dropping bombs indiscriminately on civilians.
2 points, oil and post 9/11.
Okay, sure. I mean, one of the major strategies of the United States for the past decades has been really to secure access to oil, and that pretty much shape, I think, the U.S. foreign policy, and it implied supporting regimes that are not democratic, and that has been really a problem, and we see the results today. Concerning the 9/11 attack and the dancing in the streets, I frankly think this is a cliche that has been repeated again and again. And yes, there may be some images. I think that the overall reaction of people in the Muslim world has been dismay. People did not support it whatsoever.
Austin, Texas. Good morning. Thanks for waiting.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Yes, I had a question for the director. I would like to know what his opinion would think if Israel decided to bomb Lebanon with nuclear weapons, or Syria, or Iraq, or Iran, because it seems like no one seems to care that they have all these weapons, and nobody's, every other country that has nuclear weapons they're going after.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not really an expert of nuclear weapons or security arrangement. I think it will be a disaster if such an attack will happen.
I asked Michael Rubin earlier to kind of assess Condi Rice as Secretary of State and American foreign policy in general. What's your view on how we're doing?
I think there's a lot to be done. I mean, I think it seems like every time there is progress in one corner, then there is a setback in another. And I think there is a need for a major reassessment of policies. For example, the Lebanon crisis could be used as an occasion and opportunity to really provide a comprehensive settlement in the region. The situation in Iraq could be used for comprehensive strategic arrangement in the Middle East. And unfortunately, I don't see that kind of thinking at all here in Washington at this point.
Let me just follow up very quickly, though, because if you go back to the Nixon administration or the Clinton administration or the Carter administration, very engaged, very involved in the Middle East in particular, and then the first couple of years of this administration, the Bush administration, more disengaged, and yet in both circumstances we haven't had too much success.
Yes, I think, I mean, it's not just the level of engagement or of commitments on to engage for what. I mean, those are really that's the problem. Those are the crux of the question. I mean, to engage on or for